Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Brittany Bagwell. I'm the marketing manager here at eGoldFax. Joining me today, I have Stuart Egley. He's the director of cloud solutions here, and he's going to be running us through this crash course on selling cloud faxing. Joining him and helping us out is Josh Krochmal. He's the solutions engineer at All Copy Products. And then we also have Bill Vanek. He's the VP of Strategic Alliances here, and he's going to be helping us out during the Q&A section. Just a few housekeeping items we got a thumbs up, thank you. The recording will be going out tomorrow, so don't expect it today. It'll be out tomorrow afternoon. And if you want to send it to any of your coworkers or anything like that, please do. We love that. We will be having a Q&A section at the end. It'll be the last 20 to 30 minutes. And there is a spot on your screen to ask all of your questions. So please ask all the questions you have. But all three of these guys here, Josh, Bill, and Stuart, will be answering those questions. So we're really excited. This is going to be super informative. And yeah, we can go ahead and get started.
All right. And as Brittany said, I'm very pleased to welcome Josh Krochmal here with us today. I've worked with Josh over the years, and he's going to give us his perspective. He has a lot of experience with educational wins and the ins and outs of those types of deals. So I'm going to lean on him as well. He is an expert in that field. All right. So what we're going to cover today is the discovery process in an educational environment, if you will. The benefits of eGoldFax for education, overcoming those objections that you may run into here or there. Some vertical wins, some nice vertical wins in the educational space. The Q&A, as Brittany mentioned, and then the drawing later on for the $50 gift cards. So still a little slow here. There we go. So first off, we're going to touch on discovery and the things to look out for and the things to be aware of in this type of environment. So first off, we've got data security and compliance. There's a lot that goes into an education type win in that you have to deal with things like FERPA, which we'll touch on in a moment. HIPAA is part of the educational environment as well because student health records and things like that. Faxing and workflow frustrations that people are running into time and time again, hard to get a hold of the device, fax lines tied up, things like that. The cost, what are you spending now? What are you going to be spending down the road? So we're going to hit on some data compliant questions here. How secure is that faxed infrastructure and process? Are documents being left on a feeder? Are documents being left in an output tray for maybe somebody to see that shouldn't see that type of information? Could some of the fax processes violate FERPA or HIPAA privacy requirements? Is that information being viewed by people that it shouldn't be? So let's touch on what FERPA is, if you're not familiar with it. It is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Some of the violations, think of it almost as like HIPAA for educational environments. Some of those violations include sharing student information, exposing social security numbers of those students, posting grades publicly, having that information available to just about anyone, and revealing a student athlete's academic status and the grades that are going along with that student. Private schools aren't always subject to FERPA regulations, but most of the time they do follow along and with those same guidelines. All right, and as I mentioned, FERPA sort of is like a HIPAA compliance requirement for education, but HIPAA is still part of that education environment or educational environment. Obviously, it's going to protect the privacy of the student's educational records. We're going to grant parents and guardians access to that student's education record as well. It protects personal health info, all the PHI like in a regular healthcare environment, and it allows healthcare providers to share that PHI with school nurses, physicians for treatment purposes with parental consent and authorization. So we got some additional data compliance questions as well. Are you able to restrict unauthorized people from sending, receiving, and viewing, or even copying faxes with that confidential information? Are inbound faxes being received directly by the intended recipient? Or as I mentioned earlier, are they sitting out on an output tray for somebody to pick up by accident or maybe with some not so good intentions? And number 5, can you reproduce previously sent and received fax pages for compliance purposes? Remember, eGoldFax offers that included archiving. So we'll touch on some of those workflow challenges within that educational environment right now. Is the staffer wasting time and paper printing electronic documents for faxing? Can you send and receive faxes remotely? So there's some other things in that workflow environment as well. Are those devices nearby? Because, as you guys know, most of the time people aren't, equipping fax kits on each and every MFP that they have throughout their environment. So you have to keep in mind now with eGoldFax, almost any device, just about any MFP, is going to be fax compliant. You can use scan to email or you can use our native connectors. But in a typical environment, are those fax devices convenient for those individuals that use it regularly within certain departments? So keep that in mind, because with eGoldFax, virtually every MFP is fax capable at that point. So some of the things to keep in mind, the industry changes and costs. The FCC is allowing the sunsetting of POTS lines effective August 2nd of 2022. The infrastructure for the old copper network is definitely having issues, and they're basically, as we're saying here, sunsetting it so that they don't have to maintain with those high costs of that current infrastructure. By 2025, AT&T is estimating that over 50% of their copper infrastructure is going to be decommissioned. And right now we're looking at beginning in the next couple of months. We get a lot of panicked calls from customers and resellers like yourselves out there, with somebody in dire need of fax connections because their copper lines have gone away. So one of the things, as I just touched on, those lines are going away. They're being replaced with IP-based, connections and circuits out at the street level. And that causes, as we all know, very unreliable faxing. You're sending out text to slow the speed and the communications down, and it just doesn't get any better. With eGoldFax, all of those issues are gone. And then what does that mean for your business? What opportunities do you have because of that? That's one thing to keep in mind. I know, Josh, you probably ran into that a few times, with educational wins as well as, wins within healthcare, et cetera. How often did you see that as an issue with, unreliable communication?
Regularly. I mean, just the fact that the analog lines are either going away or becoming almost cost prohibitive in a lot of environments really is, in a way, helping our cause, because then we're going in with an amazing solution like GoldFax, pretty much pouring those lines away. They're saving money on the cost of those analog lines, and in many cases, just the cost that they're paying, especially in schools and in government, just the cost that they're paying for those analog lines usually ends up paying for the GoldFax solution 30 times over in some cases. So it makes our job easier from my perspective. So I guess
yes.
Thank you, phone company.
Yep. And look right here. I mean, Josh was speaking to this. Look at the cost of these analog lines in certain cases. I had, a panicked call from somebody in downtown New York City. Their lines were moving to a cost of $1,000 a piece. And he tried to get eGoldFax, and we did set up in just about a day and a half. So everything was running smoothly, and they were avoiding those very expensive costs. Look at this phone line cost right here, $1835.71. I mean, that is amazing. And they can get away with it because a lot of people require these lines for faxing, elevators, alarm systems, and they haven't moved beyond that to a service like eGoldFax. One of the things too is carriers are doing this fairly quickly. And a lot of times I think these notices just become like junk mail or something that's set off to the side and people don't think about it until they get in that bind when their faxing, in essence, isn't even working at all. A lot of these carriers are also moving to a usage-based model, and versus all you can send and receive. So again, you're going to get hit as a customer with these larger costs per month. And again, you're going to see this right here. We have out in Missouri, we had it was a city government. Their POTS line cost increased from $32 to $120 a month. And then as we see here in this example bill, we had one customer that was getting charged $1,835 per month for an analog POTS line. It's just getting to a ridiculous point at this point. So by transitioning those customers to eGoldFax, you can get them, you can save them money, but on top of that, there's so much more. There's the archiving, there's the no busy on inbound. There's keeping these faxes in the electronic realm, not printing them out, not printing every single fax that comes in, and not printing every document that you need to fax out. Fax directly from your desktop. So if you guys can reach out to those customers, whether it's educational, healthcare, finance, city, county, state government, do it before someone else does. All right, let's touch on overcoming the objections with the eGoldFax in a cloud-based solution. So one of the things we always like to mention here is how at almost 2025, we are still seeing growth, pretty substantial growth in the fax industry. It's predicted that by 2030, that the faxing industry is still going to be up around $12.32 billion for the global online fax market. I mean, that is amazing, coming up at 2025 and here on this graph at 2030, that we're still here. And we're using faxing, and these industries are using faxing to such a large extent. So some of the security advantages with eGoldFax, not only can we bring in and port those numbers that maybe a principal has and maybe an admin has, or a nurse in a nurse's station within a school has, but we can also provide new numbers very, very easily for any department, any user. And these numbers are only 50 cents a month at retail to the customer. So again, you can assign them to key users, maybe departments that don't have their own inbound fax line now. We can get those numbers with no upfront cost and just 50 cents a month. Compliance. Obviously, we've got to comply with the HIPAA and FERPA requirements. With eGoldFax and these individual numbers, we can route these faxes directly to an individual, keep those documents off of a fax device that is shared, so that that information is not lost or doesn't fall into the wrong hands. I do like to mention, when going over the service, the platform of choice for eGoldFax is Microsoft Azure. It's been unbelievably reliable. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are familiar with it. It is a world-class cloud platform trusted by a ton of different companies in the Fortune 500. And it's what we chose, and we couldn't be happier. It's been a really solid platform for us. All right, we're going to touch on some of the GoldFax workflow advantages at this point. So again, you've got these machines, you've got these MFPs, they're in the teacher's lounge, they're in a school, and then their nurse's office, maybe in a counselor's department. One of the things to remember, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, eGoldFax is going to help spread the capability of faxing to just about every MFP. So as long as we have minimally a machine that can do scan to email, and hopefully one of the machines from the various manufacturers that we support, they're going to have fax capability, and that's not going to be an added cost. Remember, we are unlimited when it comes to MFPs for an account. So eGoldFax is enabling all MFPs, not just those with fax kits or near a phone jack. No longer do you need those devices located where they have a jack to connect to the wall, because many MFPs out there obviously are Wi-Fi based as well. So you don't even need to have that physical network connection. Unlimited users with eGoldFax, unlimited devices, as I just mentioned, with all of the manufacturers that we are compatible with. And basically, we work with any mix. If you've got a mixed environment with maybe some Bricos and some Sharps, we can deal with that. If you've got a mixed environment with Kyocera and Xerox, we can deal with that. So just keep in mind, you're not limited to just, a certain manufacturer, certain brand. We basically can integrate with just about every device out there, whether it's using scan to email, as I mentioned, or our eGoldFax specific connector that, we support many of the different manufacturers out there that you guys are aware of. So some of the workflow integrations that we have, PaperCut, the PaperCut SMTP and API integration, MyQ integration, fax to folder, and maybe you've got a document management software that the customer is using, or OCR. We can drop those faxes into that specified folder for a given number. Maybe there's EMR, EHR integration, not necessarily at a school district, but possibly, definitely in a healthcare environment. We can drop those faxes into a given folder, and we can also take those faxes and send outbound when using the eGoldFax desktop and other integration methods that we have. So we're going to touch on a couple more of the advantages with eGoldFax. Here we're going to touch on inbound faxes. So number one, we can route inbound faxes to email addresses. It could be a distribution list. It can be individuals, a list that we make and create within the eGoldFax admin portal, or it could just be one single individual, or maybe even a shared mailbox. So, and that is the most popular inbound method for routing right now, but there are other options as well. We can route to an MFP or a printer. So inbound faxes are workflows that require a fax to print off as a hard copy. We can do that as well. We can fax in, as I mentioned a moment ago, to a folder on a network or a share, so people can view those faxes out of a Windows network folder. We can even drop those in there, and it may be a way for the customer to have a local copy of every inbound fax while we're still emailing the faxes, because all of these options are available for each number and they are not mutually exclusive. And then last but not least, we can route inbound faxes into the eGoldFax desktop application. This application, which we'll touch on in a moment, is set up very much like Outlook. And there is an inbox, and those inbound faxes can be routed to users within this interface. They can make the eGoldFax desktop an entire fax environment that when they're sending and receiving, they're only within that eGoldFax desktop and not even leveraging email. All right, so we touched on inbound. Let's talk about outbound faxing. Again, email. We can fax outbound leveraging email with just fax number at eGoldFax.com. Over 70% of our user base is leveraging sending from email. There's no need to manage a separate interface. Just about everybody knows how to send an email message with attachments, and those attachments are what are turned into the fax image. And also, excuse me, it's just one less thing to have to train users on. Josh, I know that, over the years you've been involved with people using email, the MFP integration, our desktop. What are you seeing out there? Are they typically leveraging, in your point of view, with your experience, email, or is it just a mixture of all of our options?
So within education, when it comes to receiving that mix and match kind of functionality that you were talking about is really quite huge, because some schools prefer anything that's going to the nurse, print. Other schools prefer everything routed via email. So just to be able to have that flexibility within kind of underneath one umbrella is hugely beneficial when you're talking about the eGoldFax solution inside of the education environment. And when it comes to sending, so often you have these conversations with schools where people will print something out, put it in the document feeder, fax it through an analog line through the copier, wait to get the confirmation page. They will then shred what they just printed, the fax. They will take that confirmation page. They will then scan that to their email because they have to attach it to a student's chart or something along those lines. What this solution allows users to do is, if the document is already electronic, they can send it via email. I mean, we've seen volumes reduce just because of the implementation of the eGoldFax solution. Most in education, we definitely see it associated with the paper cut solution, because then the workflow is simplified. User walks up, swipes the badge, hits fax right through the paper cut interface. It then does the auto append via eGoldFax, sends it out, and then the user gets that confirmation page back right in their own email right after sending it. So it really kind of takes a lot of that guesswork out and improves efficiency and productivity in the district as a whole. It's an easy conversation.
Yep. Thanks, Josh. See, you've always got all the answers.
Only at work.
Right. So we also have, obviously the ability to send faxes out via various MFPs and MFP manufacturers. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that in just a moment. We also have the ability to print to fax using the lightweight eGoldFax, PTF as we sometimes call it, to just be in any Windows application, choose File, choose Print, and send that fax out. And we also have the eGoldFax desktop interface that we mentioned a little bit earlier. So when enabling an MFP, this interface for all supported manufacturers and devices with eGoldFax is going to look like this. It's very clear, very simplistic, very easy to use, and I think really requires very little to no training to have your users use this efficiently. You can just easily type in a fax number, load the feeder, and click Start. You could type in a fax number, a contact name, a company name, which are optional, these values, and it will appear on the cover sheets. And you could even choose numbers from an address book. As you add, if you already have multiple recipients, you click Add to Recipients, and that list of recipients will appear right here in this middle section. Obviously, we support duplex mode for double-sided originals, but I think one of the best options and the most, I think, well-received is down in this lower right corner with the confirmation email. No longer are users, talking about efficiency that Josh was alluding to, no longer are users just going to stand around the machine waiting for that confirmation to come back when that fax is completed. They can type in their email address and go back to their desk, and they're going to be notified in their inbox about the final status of that fax. We even have a drop-down support for the last few email addresses that were used, and since these devices are typically departmentally located, hopefully that user's email address is there. They can click on the drop-down and just choose their address again for notification without having to type it in each and every time. But again, a very smooth interface, a very secure interface that's leveraging port 443 up to us directly in the cloud, TLS over HTTPS. So a very secure connection for all of the integrated MFPs that we support. It's mimicking that traditional workflow. It's dedicated eGoldFax connectors for these brands that I'm sure many of you out there are familiar with and that you sell and that we integrate with. Very soon, we've got some more interfaces coming for other manufacturers, and be on the lookout for that. We will send out announcements to that effect. It's also very important to keep in mind that older or devices that don't have, that certain extra bit, if you will, internally to support our interfaces, any older device or even a current device that supports scan to email can also leverage eGoldFax. For example, a lot of different machines have the ability to leverage SMTP email in the background and use something called fax server mode or internet fax compatibility. And what you do is set up the machine to add the suffix @eGoldFax.com. And then the user walks up, types in their fax number, and then behind the scenes, the machine is adding @eGoldFax.com, and off that job goes directly to our service in the cloud with TLS for security. And again, even a machine that doesn't have that, if it's older, you can just do a standard scan to email, type in the fax number @eGoldFax.com. Here's a little bit larger shot of that, just so everybody can get a good look at it if you haven't seen it on one of the manufacturers that we currently support. At the end of the Q&A, if you have any questions on this, please let us know. All right, next we're going to touch on our print to fax. That's the lightweight app where you can be in just about literally any Windows application that has the ability to print. And instead of printing to a hard copy printer, all you do is file print, select the eGoldFax printer, and this is the dialog that would pop up. You could type in a message for the cover sheet. You could type in your names, the numbers for recipients, or pull them from an address book. You can even add attachments to what you have printed, maybe a PDF when you printed from Word and you wanted to add something else that, related to that document. You could add that PDF as an attachment, and we'll take the printed document and that PDF attachment, combine them, and send them out as a fax. You could even select cover sheets and various settings like email notification. It's going to default to the user, but we also have the ability to send notification to other users. One of the things to remember about the desktop and the print to fax is we don't leverage email. So if you do get a little pushback from a customer, in this case, a school district or a school, and maybe they're not that comfortable leveraging email, even though we make use of TLS 1.2, these interfaces with the print to fax and the desktop leverage port 443 as well, like the MFPs. That's akin to a connection to us like online banking is, that we use, almost every day in our daily lives. So again, remember, these interfaces do not leverage email. Again, a great application for integration, whether you're talking about, maybe there's a student record application for students that, you typically would print out that information, walk over to advice. Now you can print directly from that student application to the PTF or the eGoldFax desktop. Select those custom cover pages. Very intuitive, very easy. Again, little to any training required, but we would, if required, help those customers out with training from our support staff. Here's a little bit larger screenshot of that. As you can see, the email confirmation addresses, subject line, message that would appear on the cover sheet, any attachments you'd like to add to the document that was printed, you could drag and drop right here, or you could actually browse to those documents. And right here, you would select the appropriate cover page for that fax job. Again, any questions about these interfaces, please let us know during the Q&A. So we looked at sending from email, from the print to fax. This is the eGoldFax desktop. It's like that all-encompassing fax environment for sending and receiving faxes. It's modeled after Outlook or an email client with an inbox and outbox for faxes that are in process, your sent folder for faxes that have been sent, and your inbox, of course, for inbound faxes that can be routed directly to the interface. As you see here, looks like email. You could see a fax in the inbox, double click it, and you're going to be able to view it in that window pane just to the right. You can automatically tag faxes. So, our tagging functionality is actually pretty robust. You could use it to denote certain users, fax users within a certain school. If you wanted to maybe build these, departments or schools back, you could tag faxes for follow-up. An inbound fax, you could search and even sort on these tags as well. So our tagging functionality, as I said, is very powerful. You can select those custom cover sheets, as I mentioned, and then you could sort those inbound faxes by caller ID, TSID, which is terminal station ID, the tag, if applied to the fax, and the date. And we also have level-based admin control. And what this means is different users that are making use of the desktop interface, they can actually be managed or maybe viewed by a supervisor or a manager for that group. So if I was a supervisor, I may be able to look at the faxes that Josh had received and sent. And all I would need to do is, and I know this is somewhat small, let's see if I have a larger image here. I would click on this pull down here, and any users that I have been authorized to view their fax transactions, I would have the ability to do so. So maybe I'm a guidance counselor or a lead counselor. I could look at all the faxes sent and received by other users within my group. And that would apply to any group or any environment. Josh, have you ever seen people use or leverage the eGoldFax desktop as like their all-encompassing fax environment for inbound, outbound, and keeping track of what they've sent or received?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely have. Where in the field where I see the app being utilized is a lot in medical facilities where, they may not necessarily want the auto append, and they do everything really from the desktop because a lot of it's already kind of electronic inherently. We see a lot of people utilizing those desktop apps at that point, and the ability to almost, with the different folder structure and the fact that it looks very Windowsy, as I say, very much like Outlook, I think is a huge benefit and value add to those users, and they do all their work right out of that interface.
Yep. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to let everybody know out there that, like our print to fax or PTF, that functionality does come along with the desktop app. So you're not having to install the print to fax as well as the desktop. The desktop includes that print to fax functionality as well. So we've talked about really the user side of everything so far: interaction with email, the desktop interface, the MFPs, faxes coming inbound via email, etc. Now we're going to touch a little bit on the admin portal. This is where an admin or IT admin, CTO, something like that, would manage the account, manage the users, manage those cover sheets, manage that inbound routing. Take a look at those metrics for inbound and outbound faxing, if they have the need to do so. So, one of the biggest things I think that the admin portal is leveraged for on an ongoing basis is either viewing those metrics of inbound and outbound faxes, just taking a look at how many faxes did this department or user send or receive, how many faxes came in on a given fax number. Again, we can apply tags to all of that and maybe charge departments or schools back if needed, or at least keep things segmented enough that we can leverage those tags, and we know all of this fax traffic is for one particular school. If you see right here in this example, all of this information is applied and associated with each fax transaction: the date and time, the number of pages, the number it came from, if it was published in caller ID, whether it was successful or not, on an outbound fax especially. And then always at the far right, you also have the fax image from that transaction. Double click that PDF icon, you're going to get that fax, and you could download it, you could print it again, you could fax it again, you could email it if it was safe to do so. Anything you need to do with that archive fax, you can do. And we offer that archiving with every eGoldFax plan, from our smallest to up in the millions of pages per month. We offer unlimited archiving up to 10 years. And a lot of our competitors, some of you probably heard me say this before, they charge for archiving a base level, and then as the archive grows, so does your monthly fee. So it doesn't matter if they're doing 1 million pages, we're still going to give them 10 years of archiving of each and every inbound and outbound fax. So that could be trimmed, that could be X number of months or X number of years, but we're going to provide that archiving for them up to 10 years. Josh, have you ever heard from any of your customers out there about how archiving potentially saved them? I mean, in a HIPAA environment like applies to education as well as FERPA, if they can't get a hold of that fax data, that could be a pretty big violation if they can't reproduce something that was sent or received, let's say months or maybe a year ago.
I mean, absolutely. This capability is huge for organizations. I mean, especially anything that's utilizing any kind of medical records at HIPAA, just the ability to drill down and find specific faxes that were sent or received. I mean, a lot of times if, the fax was inbound, but perhaps misplaced, or, somebody can't find it, just to have the ability to then go back and prove that, okay, this was in fact received or this was in fact sent. And even the ability to pull up that PDF and reprint, refax, or do whatever you need to do with it, I think is a huge value add. And then no additional charges. I mean, they don't have to pay extra for that service. I don't know. It's an easy one.
Yep. Thank you, sir. So again, we've got the reporting capabilities. We've got the 10-year archiving that I mentioned. You can assign within the portal fax routing paths or, destination emails or folders. That's where that is configured. Now, again, most often that's pretty much set in stone once it's configured. But if somebody goes on vacation, you need to route those faxes to someone else. Maybe somebody leaves the organization or is out on leave. You're going to need to make a change. An admin or even a support person, it's so straightforward, could jump into the portal and easily change that routing within a minute to 2 minutes. It's that easy to make that change. So it's, again, convenience as well as the powerful ability to make that change in an instant. Okay. So within this portal, also, you can set up those tags, and you can also create and select and configure your cover sheets as well. Now, we do the majority of that cover sheet creation for the users. We have a team, as many of you are aware of, that do that for the customers. That is part of the service as well. But you need to be able to assign those cover sheets to the proper individuals within a certain department, et cetera. That's what's done currently within the admin portal. Also, this portal is protected by a two-factor authentication. So keep that in mind. That has been a big plus for a lot of our sites out there in finance. Very, very security conscious, as well as healthcare, and of course, out there in the educational environments as well. Excuse me. This is a little bit larger image of that desktop interface. I just wanted everyone to be able to see and take a look at that. As you can see, the inbox here for any inbound faxes that are routed to this user. You've got drafts for faxes that haven't been completed yet to send out. You've got your sent faxes, so you can take a look at that fax you sent yesterday, maybe send it to another person or verify something that was contained within. You've got the outbox. The outbox is for faxes that are actually in process and are in the process of sending. And then you've got your contacts. Again, just like Outlook, this is where you would have all of those fax contacts, and you could add and remove and use as necessary. Okay. Again, if you have any questions on this interface, it's called the eGoldFax desktop. Please let us know in the Q&A. And we're going to touch on industry wins. Now, I know Josh, the expert, the reason we brought him on to this webinar is that he has had some spectacular wins in the Colorado area, and he's going to speak to that in just one moment. So we're going to let Josh talk about the schools and the school districts, and then I'm going to touch on a real brief one with a college, and then we're going to let Josh speak a little bit more to the service and his experience. Go ahead, Josh, about if you want to incorporate that, with what you had to say, or if you wanted to touch on it separately, that'll be fine.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely kind of jump in, talk about some wins and all the fun stuff. Do you want me to go ahead now, Stuart?
Yes, sir.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you for including me again, Josh Krochmal, Solutions Engineer, All Copy Products, coming to you from our corporate office in Denver, Colorado. So when it comes to education, the kind of the key for us is always everything is a bid, right? Everything is an RFP. So when it comes to the bids, or when it comes to these in-person presentations, the real key is differentiating ourselves. And if all we're talking about is just the copier, everybody's talking about copiers. So how are we going to differentiate ourselves when it comes to bids, RFPs, and even just questions in the education vertical? Some folks think that paper cut is kind of the differentiator, and it definitely is, don't get me wrong. However, many bids these days specifically are requesting a solution, especially in the vertical market of education, they're requesting paper cut by name. So then what do? What I've been doing is I include eGoldFax always as a value add. A lot of times the bid may even mention other on-prem kind of old school solutions like WriteFax, for example, and request compatibility with those specific solutions. My solution to that is, of course, we support the legacy on-prem solution. However, would it benefit the district to discuss a solution that is HIPAA and FERPA compliant, totally cloud-based, phone system agnostic, with no additional software for IT to install or even manage? I mean, let's repeat that and think about what we're saying with that sentence, right? Would it benefit the district to discuss a solution that is HIPAA and FERPA compliant, completely 100% cloud-based, well, doesn't matter what your phone infrastructure is, no additional software for IT to install or manage at all. Oh, and by the way, if you currently have analog lines, it will probably be cheaper than you're currently spending on those lines. And if you have another on-prem solution in place, most likely it will be cheaper than annual support alone just for that solution. Oh, and by the way, shall we calculate the IT soft costs like time, resources, infrastructure, management of all that on-prem stuff? Most of the time, after I kind of go through all of that, all of a sudden I have their attention. And then it's a lot of, well, let's talk about that for a minute. And also sometimes what I do is I'll work out like a basic budget just to kind of show what they're spending on just analog fax lines. But at that point, no matter what, I have their attention. Then it comes down to a demo, a trial, further discussion, and then implementation. And I have to tell you, when you have folks at eGoldFax like Stuart, Courtney, Mark in support, Tammy, Brenda, everyone else there, I mean, realistically, they drastically help with the whole trial and porting process. I mean, they are an absolute pleasure to work with. I mean, in some almost all situations, you know, I get the deal, we kind of get the deal, we earn the business, and then we're sort of handing it off to eGoldFax to handle the porting, the inbound routing protocols. I mean, they literally do everything. I mean, we kind of solidify the business, and then, you know, between Courtney and everyone else, the eGoldFax team, they really take care of everything. Let's briefly talk about when PaperCut is brought into the mix, either by the district or by you guys or by the vendor. Configuring this to work inside of a PaperCut solution, I mean, it's a breeze. I have a school district on record that I actually talk about here later that say things like, if I knew it was going to be this easy and seamless, I would have done this years ago. All you're doing is you're creating a scan action just like scan to email or scan to Google Drive. And there are even ways to configure this for all print governance solutions. So it isn't necessarily PaperCut specific. The fact of the matter is the eGoldFax solution is an incredible add-on and game changer to any bid that you are responding to. Let's go over a couple of the wins here. So large school districts, Colorado, roughly 350 multifunction devices. We were responding to the RFP. We brought up eGoldFax purely as an add-on in the RFP. They didn't even ask for it. They were asking for fax boards on copiers. So all we did was literally put a flyer on there, a little bit of like kind of a soft sell sort of in there with it, talked about the cloud-based functionality and things like that. Then all of a sudden they call us back, and literally all they wanted to talk about was faxing. They didn't even want to talk about the hardware. They didn't want to talk about, you know, they already had PaperCut, but they didn't want to talk about how we were going to further enhance that component of the solution. They only wanted to talk about faxing. And they had something like 300 random fax numbers, some analog, different carriers, everything that the district was paying for. What we were able to do was bring that down to 119 lines that were ported over to eGoldFax, and that really completely solidified the deal for us. The savings on the phone lines alone ended up paying for the eGoldFax, the PaperCut, and some of the hardware. All we had to do was throw it in as a value add. Another big win, largest school district in Colorado, we responded to the RFP with eGoldFax to replace WriteFax. The best part about this was we were actually, I think Stuart was on this presentation as well, we were actually presenting it to them, and I used some of their words against them. They, in one of the questions and answers, somebody asked, you know, what infrastructure is WriteFax currently running on, and what is this the desired architecture moving forward? And so the answer was WriteFax is run on a series of virtual blah, 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 right? So then I'm sitting there in the meeting with them, and I say to them, well, guys, you know, we're talking about faxing, but imagine if you guys had to continue to support the fact that WriteFax is run on a series of virtual machines on VMware 7. The underlying hardware is Cisco UCS Blade servers, currently M4 series, migrating to M6 later this year. You guys are utilizing NSX for network, microsegmentation. The servers are 10 gigabyte native. Yes, this is your ideal architecture. However, imagine going to a cloud-based fax solution that is all volume-based. Oh, and by the way, the price in RFP already includes all of that, and it's right around the same cost you're paying for maintenance alone, and we can eliminate all that infrastructure. And then I said, oh, and by the way, what do you guys think it's going to save you just in terms of supporting all that infrastructure? I sort of paused and kind of looked at all their faces and then said, I guess there's some savings there. They all kind of laughed, but I think they were really all a little bit shocked that that's kind of how it all worked out. Another really large district, we actually offered them eGoldFax initially when we were doing this deal in, I think it was 2019 or 2018. We were doing this deal initially. We offered them eGoldFax, but they just thought it was going to be too big of a lift. But then all of a sudden later on, they wanted to do a trial. We did the trial, and then actually Joel from the district, this is a quote from him. He said, from a 30,000-foot view, implementing eGoldFax to our MFT devices papercut was easy. Our papercut environment is currently version 21, and we simply set up a fax action very much like any other scan options and scoped it against the appropriate user group. For our fleet of 280-plus sharps, all became outgoing fax machines with an interface most users seem to just get. All incoming and outgoing confirmations are provided via email. And he says, I wouldn't normally jump through these types of hoops and provide a recommendation for just any vendor. Josh and ACP have been really good to work with. They follow through on what they say, respond in a timely fashion, and do things behind the scenes we need without a fuss or a large amount of end user complaints. eGoldFax is something I wish we had implemented years ago, especially before we sent home a small army of site-based registrars in spring of 2020, who can now operate and perform all of their functions, all their job functions from almost anywhere. So, I think the point of it is that eGoldFax, amazingly solid, viable solution once it's in the environment, and it is absolutely almost like a platform, like a diving board to get deeper in the weeds and get more involved with the school. And that's all I have. Thank you, eGoldFax, for letting me jump in and talk. And I know the Stuart has a little bit more, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Josh, you'll be around for the Q&A in case something's directed to you. And just real quick, you saw that colleges were listed there. I had a college in Western North Carolina, which is a state that I'm in. And just real quick, it was, they were a very security conscious site. And we won the business strictly because other services they looked at, which were similar to eGoldFax, didn't offer the levels of security that they felt comfortable with. Plus, they did a trial, and they were so happy with the onboarding process that Josh was alluding to a moment ago that it just cinched the deal right there. So we're going to get to the Q&A now. So we'll let Brittany jump back in. She's sort of the moderator, I believe, today for the Q&A. Thanks again, Josh, for being a part of this too.
Thank you so much, Josh. Josh, I had a question for you, actually, when you were talking about some of the wins that you had. And earlier on in the conversation, we talked about how we're moving away from POTS lines, things like that. Have you ever had any objections where you're selling them onto something and they're like adamant they want to do a POTS line, but you're trying to tell them no, eGoldFax? Like, have you ever had that objection? And then also, how do you get around that objection with them? How do you address that?
So for me, it's less about the POTS line, and it's more about they have this bank of numbers and they really don't want to port any out. They don't want to go down that route, which I have had some schools that is something that they talk about. And then what we do is we actually have the school then forward that inbound number then to a newly created eGoldFax number. And then all the outgoing is then being utilized through eGoldFax, as well as any inbound number that rings into the school on that number then just forwards to a eGoldFax number. So the way that I talk about that is really just about, if you don't want to give up, any of your bank of numbers, if you feel more comfortable, we have a way to talk through that as well.
Very cool. Awesome. Stu, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Josh hit all of the salient points on that. Josh has been a partner of ours for such a long time. He's probably been through every ins and outs that I've gone through over the years too.
All right, awesome. So I'll jump into some of the questions we've got. And guys, don't forget to add those questions into the Q&A box. And at the end of the Q&A, we will draw for the $350 gift cards. So our first question would be, can we sell the extra numbers at a higher cost than 50 cents?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So again, that's a monthly charge. And, that's the suggested MSRP, if you will, for that option and the pricing for the service, all MSRP. You're free as a reseller to charge what you think you can charge, without objection. So it's up to you what you want to price options and the service for.
Perceived value, folks. I mean, you guys are in sales, a lot of you, I'm assuming, sell it for whatever you want. I mean, perceived value.
Bill, I think this question might be for you. So if you want to like hop on, is it compatible with Epson AMC series? I think maybe he's talking about the connector app, because he asked this question around the connector app slide.
Yeah, let Bill answer that model specifically, but yeah, he was talking about the connector app. Bill.
Yeah, well, let's go on to another question. I'll go ahead and look that up. What was the model number again? I'm sorry, Brittany.
AMC series.
Oh, the AMC series. Yeah, it's compatible with that.
Okay, perfect. I knew you would know it off the top of your head.
Yeah.
When sending from a shared device in a library, how do you get the confirmation page to the sender?
It's funny that I've had that question come up before. So they're going to need, with a supported device that supports the eGoldFax interface directly, they're going to need to type in their personal email address there. Now, one of the things that we can do is we could turn off that drop down so that no one else is going to walk up to that device and see, jsmith@yahoo.com. It's not going to see that email notification address, but they're going to have to use that little option down in the lower right corner so that they can just get that confirmation whether the fax was successful or not back in their own personal email.
Can I add something?
Yep.
I'm going to add something very quickly. So eGoldFax also has the advanced routing agent as well, which is a little small utility that can run inside the client's environment. So our primary brand is Konica, and Konica doesn't have the apps. We do a lot of the auto append. So for example, what I do in a shared environment like that is I'll charge the client for the advanced routing agent. I'll have that run somewhere in their environment, and then I statically assign the from email address to that specific copier, like library@schoolname.com or something, like library123@schoolname.com. And then I'll have eGoldFax actually set up that when the confirmation page is being sent back to that specific email address, it is then routed to automatically print out on that copier itself. So that's the way I use.
Yeah, more like a traditional environment, getting that hard copy back.
Yeah, I mean that's usually the way that I have that set up.
Okay, that's a very good point.
So a couple of different ways.
Perfect. Can that confirmation email be sent to more than one contact?
Only leveraging a distribution list, because you can only type in one address in that field.
All right, and then
or with the advanced routing agent as well. Or with the advanced routing agent, you could do multiple email addresses with the advanced routing agent, but that is an add-on cost.
Yeah.
Can the confirmation email using an MFP connector be programmed and or locked?
Bill, do you have an answer to that, to be able to lock it? We can set a default on that for the device. Bill, can we lock that field out? It's a good question. Never had anybody ask.
The short answer is you can have a fixed email address for confirmation for a particular, whether it's a user or for a like an MFP that's submitting the scan. So in other words, you could assign anything that was submitted from a particular device in the HR department could automatically be sent to HR faxes at example.com, in addition to or separately from whatever maybe somebody sets up for the device itself. Like if they're using one of our connectors and they put in an email address, this could be an additional email address that automatically gets the confirmation.
Awesome. What OS is supported with the desktop app and print driver? Chromebooks, question mark?
No, it's only Windows based at this time. I mean, with a Chromebook or any maybe Apple device, what our customer base typically does is leverage the secure email side of things to send and receive. That desktop and PTF or print to fax are both Windows applications currently. And I think you asked what versions, 10, 11. I think all the, the current, if you will, operating system versions.
Yeah, it's Windows 10 and above.
Yeah.
Awesome. I am new to the business and would like a deeper dive into this product. Where can I get this information? And we had a couple questions very similar to that.
Well, I mean, obviously they can be assigned, a sales rep like myself within the organization that can go into much more detail. I mean, this is what I typically do when I have a newer reseller is just make that connection. And then we take a much deeper dive than what we're doing here today, to show the ins and outs, maybe talk a little bit about implementation aspects of the MFP side of things, of the desktop and things like that. So, Brittany will have your information and then we can assign a sales rep to you and then take it from there. Right, Brittany?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also, if I could, sorry, Brittany, if I could jump back in, we could provide whoever asked the specific model numbers for Epson. They're all listed on the eGoldFax connector for Epson brochure, but in general, it's the Epson Workforce Enterprise MFPs, which are like the AMC series and the WFC series, as well as the Epson Workforce Pro devices. But those are all listed on the latest eGoldFax connector for Epson.
Perfect. Stuart, back into the deeper dive of the product. Are there any online training courses or materials, things like that they can have access to?
That's funny. That's what I thought Bill was going to bring up when he mentioned the Epson.
That's what I thought so too.
Bill, you could speak to the training. Bill did a great online training course. I'll let you speak to that, Bill.
Yeah. So I think you can think of training in two categories. We can do custom online training for any of our resellers based on, the group that was looking for training. Could be their sales team, it could be their solutions team, could be their technical field technicians, whatever the group is, and so we can tailor that on a one-by-one basis. Also, it's always good to know who the audience is. If it's like some new sales reps that don't have any industry experience, which was mentioned earlier, that's great to know so that we can, focus on that side of it. And if there's some other people who have tons of experience, they may want to get a little bit deeper and get into some of the, the idiosyncrasies of how eGoldFax could help them be competitive. But on top of that, what we do is we record all of these webinars like this one. We make them available to our reseller partners so they can always go back and go through these at their leisure. And then we also do have a self-paced online training course that you can take and then kind of just go at your leisure. You can bounce around to different areas of the training session. So we can provide information on that later.
And our sales staff is great at the service and being able to explain and, help clear up any questions or issues you may have. So we can definitely work with you. Whoever you're working with as a sales representative here at eGoldFax can help you out.
Perfect. Guys, I'm going to ask 4 more questions because we are right at time. I'm going to go ahead and ask 4 more questions. If you still have some, add them in there and your account manager will reach out to you after this, but let's do 4 more questions and then I'll do our drawing. This is a good one. Can we add eGoldFax if we are not selling or if we're not the copier dealer? Example, as a service takeover.
Can I take this one?
By all means.
Jump in.
Absolutely. And I actually tell our reps that part of like when you're walking into an environment, how we're not really talking about copiers because everybody in town has copiers. I very much talk to them about bringing up things like faxing as kind of part of their very basic entry-level discovery. And I have to tell you, you put a fax solution in an environment that improves efficiency and productivity, all of a sudden they remember you, and then they absolutely will come back to you when it comes time for the copier piece. So absolutely. I mean, I tell my reps to do that. So absolutely.
And we also, to add to that, we also have MSPs. I mean, it's not just copier-based sales. It may just be a, managed service provider or something like that wants to have fax solutions, or even, and a lot of dealers out there now sell, voice over IP phone systems. Well, as soon as you implement something like that, faxing is going to become a little bit more of an issue. So eGoldFax is a perfect companion to any, voice over IP phone system that you may sell as well.
Cool. Back to the confirmation emails. When using the confirmation email, does the portal still store the delivery confirmation?
Yes. Yep. The portal will always have the record of the transaction, whether inbound or outbound. So you're going to get those email notifications. You're going to get those faxes routed to you via email or in the desktop, or even a link emailed to you that ties you back to a secure link to the fax image.
How are you quoting when a potential customer doesn't know how many pages of faxes they are currently doing? Are you getting much negative feedback with the pay per page, and how do you handle that situation?
I'm gonna ask Josh, but I'm also gonna just add, what I've seen before real quick is, no, we haven't had pushback on that. But, we typically say, let's run for 30, 60, 90 days and get that run rate. But there are ways. We have enough experience that we can do some pretty good estimations for the business type, for, how many students, how many schools in the district, those kind of things. So we can get some pretty good numbers, pretty accurate numbers. But Josh, there are other things to fall back on, like FM audit and things like that, right? To try to help with that page volume estimation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if they're an existing client on the copier side, then I can utilize what's called FM audit to kind of pull their fax usage. But also a lot of times, it is a guess. We're sort of guessing, but also one of the reasons why eGoldFax is such an amazing partner is they actually give the client the ability to upgrade plans, and they just pay the difference in the plan, right? So let's say you include that in like a copier lease, or you include it where it's 3 years cash up front or something. They can actually pay for an increased plan, and they just pay that monthly difference between the two plans. It's not like the days of a Verizon cell phone where you switched your plans and there were prorations and everything was a chaotic disaster and your first bill was $6,000 more than you thought. Yeah, that's nothing like that. They literally pay the difference in the plan. So if we realize, and again, Stuart and Tam, the team over there, they're great to communicate this information back. If they see somebody is just blowing through that volume and they're about to have an obscene amount of overages, they absolutely will communicate that back. And then we're able to kind of right-size the plan almost on the fly. So again, I chalk that up to eGoldFax just being another great partner for us.
Okay, perfect. Last question, and we did get a few more after this last question. Your account manager will reach out to you. The last question is, do you know the pricing on porting over existing fax numbers?
So the way it works is the one-time cost to port an existing fax number over to eGoldFax, it starts at $20 one-time fee. If you have a quantity of fax numbers that are going to be ported between 1 and 49 total fax numbers, so it's going to be $20 per fax number. In large ports, where they have a lot of fax numbers, if it's 50 or greater fax numbers, and if they're going to be porting them all at the same time, they're all provided by the same telephone carrier and are on a single telephone account, then the one-time charge for porting will drop down to $2 per fax number. But again, that has to be, with a large quantity of fax numbers all done at the same time, on the same carrier.
Thanks, Bill.
And then keep in mind the monthly recurring charge will be, 50 cents per number ported, just to keep that number active on eGoldFax, if it's a local area code or toll fax number.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to share my screen and go ahead and do that pick. If one of the guys could let me know whenever you can see my screen.
It's up.
Awesome. Perfect. So we're picking for 3 people.
Josh, you're not in there, so don't get any ideas.
Sorry. All right, perfect. So I will reach out to the guys that were chosen. Let me screenshot this real quick. I'll reach out to y'all in a bit and send out that gift card.
Congratulations, Matt, Lee, and Michael.
Don't quit your day job and try and go be a game show host. All right, awesome. That is it. Let me stop sharing my screen so y'all can stop seeing. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. Anybody who, again, had a question, we will reach out later. The recording will be out tomorrow along with these slides. And if you have any questions, reach out to your account manager, or you can reach out at sales@eGoldFax.com. And Josh, thank you again so much for helping us out with this webinar.
Thank you for having me.
Josh, thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks, Brittany. Thanks,
Bye,
Bill.
guys.
Thanks, everyone, for attending.